Hello, everyone, and welcome back to WABAN, the movie and TV show podcast where an expert on the subject discusses things with the average viewer. I am your host, Nim, and today I am joined by Varric. Did I do that one before? I didn't do that one before, did I?
Julie, do the thing. Actually, you know what? You actually might have, because I remember doing that exact same thing.
Oh, did you? Okay, well, again, Varric again. There you go. I felt like it was more interesting than just doing the villain of the season because, like, Kovir is not that.
You know what
interesting.
I did, right? You know what I did last time? I did. Julie, is this thing on? How's work?
Oh yeah.
As if he's like on a microphone.
Yeah. Speaking of Varric and Julie, they get some development in this season that
Julie's
you
not
don't
just
really expect.
A cold war machine robot that does what he says.
Right. Julie's like an actual character now. Like before, she's his assistant and that's it.
And
but she has some
up and like.
She's in love with him, but he doesn't appreciate her the way she wants to all these years. Well, and then there's like a whole twist with it because like she joins Kovira, and you're like, what? And then you find out that she actually did that on purpose to, because
they start hinting at it, right? And then she joins her, and it's just like, oh, is this like backlash? What's happening? And then you find out she's lying, and it's like, oh, okay,
yeah,
I get it.
Well, it's kind of interesting because you think about it, like it shows just how smart she is as a character. Like she's a really intelligent person, and it's like, which makes sense because in order to be Varric's assistant and like do all this stuff for him, you got to be pretty intelligent. Like
in order to decipher what he's saying, if I do the thing. Yeah.
Right. There's no more things to do, sir. That's a great line for like the climax, because it's the big climax of the story. You got to get to that big ending where like everything, all hope is lost. But for her, it's just there are no more things to do.
It is out of our hands now. I can no longer assist as I have done.
And then in their vows and their wedding, will you do the thing for the rest of our lives? Just
their relationship is weird, but they do make it pretty cute at the end.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think it's great that the end of this show, like the last scene of Legend of Korra, is Varric's wedding. That's just great. Like
it's not like any of the love triangle from the beginning. Nah, it's Varric.
Speaking of love triangle from the beginning, I mean, I think we know who Korra ended up with.
Honestly, I was expecting it. Like, come on.
At what point were you expecting it? I'm curious.
Before, like, back when I first watched a few of these episodes on Netflix, I had figured it out.
Okay, gotcha.
Years of just looking at fan art every once in a while on the internet and just being like, oh yeah, people are really shipping that.
Yeah. So there's a whole thing with that where it's like, it's like they wanted to make them kiss at the end, but they didn't think the studio would like that if they did, so they didn't, and then so they had them just stare into each other's eyes holding hands instead, which was nice.
I mean, it's effective, but like misses that oomph.
Yeah, exactly. Well, right, because I mean the whole thing is like the original show ended with the main character kissing their love interest, right? Like Avatar ended with Aang kissing Katara, and it was they wanted to have that moment for this show. But they didn't go all the way with it because, they were worried about like, obviously at the time, what they would think of it. They'd be like, well, they didn't think the studio would be okay with a lesbian kiss on screen in their show. But
a lot of angry Alabama parents.
Right. Which nowadays I think that would be more accepted. But I don't know when this came out. I think this show ended closer to like 2014-ish, 13, 14, somewhere around there.
Definitely not later, I don't think.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to look up when did Legend of Korra end. When did Legend of Korra end? Yeah, so I'm actually curious about that. 2014. Okay, so it ended in December of 2014. Yeah, so what's the year is it? It's like 7, 8 years ago. 8 years ago. 8 years ago. There we go. That's
always a good sign. Always a good sign. What year is it?
What year is it? But yeah, so that's kind of an interesting direction for them to take it. I think it's hilarious that Mako dated both of them and they ended up together. It's like, I think that's funny.
This man has very poor luck with women.
It's like Mako's last two relationships ended up dating each other.
You know what's even weirder though, right? You'd think that would like drive them apart, right? The fact that Mako was essentially cheating on them with the other.
But it drove them closer together. Yeah. It's actually interesting. So that I know there's somewhere in the comics you actually find out that there's another. So I guess technically the characters they're not lesbian, they are bisexual, right? Obviously because they dated Mako before.
Right.
But apparently I think Kaya, the Aang and Katara's daughter, the waterbending one, is lesbian, I think. And like is somewhere in the comics it's mentioned. And there's like a part of the comics where like she like helps Asami and Korra kind of like, discover themselves in their like, just because like obviously she's gone through a similar thing because like, discovering that she was lesbian and all that, So there's like some comic that involves them like, bonding through that or something like that. I've heard of. So that's kind of interesting. Which it's kind of. What's that?
This is bringing up in my mind the moment that Bolin asked Toph about who Lin's father was.
Oh yeah. Well, she says who it is.
But no, because I had this moment in that where I was like, oh, okay, it's them. They said the name, and I didn't really register what name she said. And then I'm just like, a few minutes later, it might have been like the next episode, I went, wait, did she say Kai? As in, like, in the forest with the curved swords guy? Is that what she said? Or am I just going crazy?
No. That guy's name is Jet.
Oh yeah, it is Jet, isn't it? Fuck.
I was like, no. There. I don't remember what name she said, but
I must be out of it.
Kai is the name of a character in this show. The kid who gets airbending, the one kid. His name is Kai. Right. But obviously that wouldn't have any relation. But I think it was supposed to be just like a random character, like that you don't know. I think it was supposed to be a random name, but we still don't know.
I got messed up because it's a character in the show, and my brain was just first person available in the last actual show.
Right. But we still don't know who Sue's father is. Su Yin's father is. So maybe that theory about it being Sokka is still true. Who knows? Speaking of Toph, though, you gotta love Toph's involvement in this show.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like they nailed her character so well with like what an old Toph would be like.
I really agree. Yeah, just the cranky, get off my lawn. Be quiet.
And she's like, ooh, I get to kick the Avatar's butt some more. Yeah. I have somebody to beat up. Like, well, because you think about the other, like, original characters they've had in the show so far. Like, you have old Katara. She doesn't really, she's kind of an old, wise version of Katara. Feels like she could be the age. Right, because obviously you're going to change a lot in that many years. She might not be exactly the same. She's going to get older and wiser. Same with, like, Zuko. He doesn't feel quite the same, but that's because he's a lot older and many years have passed.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And I think it works for those characters. But, like, I just love the fact that Toph is pretty much the same personality as when she was young. And it's just Toph, but old. Change. Toph, like, and you could tell that she's, like, older and wiser, but she's still Toph.
Yeah, the only main difference is she'll kick your ass. She'll just have to deal with back pains afterwards, and she's fine with that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I love how she's just, like, roasting her kids' like metal bending skills. She's like, if you ask me, they never picked up metal bending as well as I would like them to.
Can't even find metal in your own body.
But Sue got all the metal out of my body. Nah, she's not good enough. But yeah,
I was expecting a whole thing of like, oh yeah, like Toph was right. There really are terrible at metal bending because it's actually pretty easy to bend platinum if you just look hard enough for the modes. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but Toph didn't join them for the climax, so we won't know. She's like, at some point, I'm too old. At some point, you got to leave it to the kids. Which, yeah, sure. So, okay, so I guess we'll take this back a little bit and let's just kind of talk about the main sort of thing with this season. So the main villain. Let's I guess we'll start with that. Thoughts on Kovira as the main villain, and just kind of the general, villain.
I mean, it
thing.
Works. I don't quite get her motivations or anything like that. Like they have this whole thing about her being an orphan and not wanting any of that to happen, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like that could have been done a little bit better, but honestly, it works out great anyway.
Well, I think they were going for similar type of thing of like the Fire Nation in the original show, where it was like, oh, we have all this prosperity, let's spread it to the rest of the world. Like that was their kind of thing. Like she kind of has that similar thing. Like she wants to attack like Zaofu and take it over because it has all this advanced technology and they're so well off. She wants to spread that to the rest of the Earth Kingdom, and it's kind of this. It's like the Fire Lord, but an earth-bending version of the Fire Lord. Kind of. It's like they're kind of going for that sort of thing, and the idea of like the Earth Empire, right? Which it was kind of cool to see, like, I don't know, just this show use the word empire, because that just, I feel like anytime you hear the word empire, it automatically makes you think of like Star Wars, like, I don't know, like the Empire.
For your kind of nerd, not my kind of nerd.
Well, I mean, for a lot of people, I think, you think of it's that kind of like it definitely has it's definitely a very negative connotation to the word, like empires, evil,
villains,
right. So calling it the Earth Empire was a nice little touch. And then like so I think it was kind of cool that it set it up in a way where it was like, because of what happened in the previous season, she was able to take over, because the entire Earth Kingdom was kind of in disarray because their leader was killed. And so now, it's the idea of like, you kill off a leader, you create a power vacuum, and that power vacuum is going to be filled by someone. And that someone ended up being Kovira. you know, because she doesn't see the current Earth prince to be fit to be king. So, which at the beginning of the season kind of seems a little accurate, to be honest. He's kind of, he's just like spoiled rich kid, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And Mako's just irritated dealing with him the entire time.
Yeah, but he does kind of go through like a nice little character arc to the point where, like, by the end, he's like, you know what? We're getting rid of the monarchy altogether. We're going to set up some kind of democracy or something.
And that's like even after like he discovers like, yeah, he's good at talking in speeches that he can get the people behind him as a king. And then he's like, nah, but we don't need that. I'm good at it, but we don't need it.
Right. Well, that's the thing. He can maybe use those skills in helping to set up the new government that'll ultimately be better than, a monarchy. Because, So that's a nice little touch. It's kind of cool to see just generally, like, to see kind of this world is evolving over time, right? Like the Earth Kingdom is, likely wouldn't continue to be the Earth Kingdom forever. I mean, think about kingdoms in our world, right? Like they eventually kind of become, like even something like in England, like the royal family still is there, but they're not like, they don't have the same power over the country as they used to. It's like, it's more like,
symbolic.
Yeah. So it's just kind of interesting to see that they're kind of making it like, this world is evolving in a similar way to like our own world would have evolved.
I love it when shows do that or anything does that.
Yeah.
Just having the world grow with the characters and change and evolve.
Right.
It's always such a wonderful detail.
Yeah, and this show I think does a good job at making all of it feel natural. Like the world naturally changes, with the technology that's coming forth and like all this stuff, because like obviously a big deal in this show is the idea of like they're able to bring the Earth Kingdom together so quickly because the Earth Kingdom is huge and it's all these like places everywhere that are so separate from like the capital and stuff, but they're able to bring them together so quickly because they have these super fast trains that have been invented, right? So they're able to bring them together much faster than they ever were before because in the real world that's how that works. That's how that worked in the real world when trains were invented, So they're kind of
there's no resistance because all the regions of the Earth Kingdom are pretty much fucked at this point because there's no monarch anymore and there's bandits raiding and they're in chaos. Right,
and like the rest of the world is way more advanced than them technologically too. Like if you, so they do a lot of really good. This show does a really good job at a lot of natural world building where things. Besides maybe some of the stuff in season 2 with the whole harmonic convergence stuff, that was kind of ridiculous. Like, but
thousands of years ago, this shit happened, and now you deal with it, even though you never dealt with it before.
Right. But a lot of the like natural like world building makes sense. Like the idea of Republic City existing where it does, because originally that was the part of the Earth Kingdom that the Fire Nation took over first and turned into the Fire Nation colonies. Yeah. So there were firebenders and there were people from the Fire Nation and people from the Earth Kingdom living together. They couldn't just give it to one of them. So they're like, oh, let's make it kind of its own separate country almost. The United.
The idea that Republic City then adapts to having the spirit vines all up in it. And
get
rid of it, so they just work around it.
Well, right, because you saw at the beginning of the last season, they were struggling a lot with adapting because it had just happened. But now this takes place 3 years later, so it's kind of like they've already gotten to the point where they're just used to it now.
Yeah, I have a good view of the spirit vines. The what? The spirit vines. Those things came 3 years ago. Fucking great.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I had it.
But yeah, no, I think the show generally handles that really well, I think, which is nice. And then it's just really good at world building in general. So, I mean, the original show was, so it had a really good foundation for good world building, and then this show did a good job at building on that.
Yeah. 10 out of 10. Well, maybe not quite 10 out of 10, but pretty damn good.
Pretty good. Yeah. No, Avatar is 10 out of 10 all the way, but yeah. This is like... I put Korra maybe like 7 or 8 out of 10 overall, like the entire thing. It's good. So and they also, I think, at the beginning of the show, they did a really good job at. I really like what they did with Korra's character, especially in the first. So her journey of sort of, because she's so used to being the super powerful person who's just fighting to solve her problems, and now suddenly she has no power. She's super weak, right? And it's kind of that journey of the traveling the world and trying to find herself and everything. I think was really interesting.
And then she finds Toph, and she finds out the leftover metallic poison is what's causing it. But then she still loses. It's
exactly.
It's her own fear. It's shit. It was
exactly.
A problem.
Right, exactly. The metal that's left in her body was holding her back a little bit, but it wasn't all of it. And I think that's much more interesting. They make it a mental block, not completely a physical block. It's a combination of the two, instead of just, which makes it a lot more interesting for her to overcome. And I think
when she was fighting Kovira that first time, after the poison got out, my brain was just okay, it's not very interesting if it's just, you gotta get a bit more of the poison out, whatever, and she's fine. That's kind of boring. And then I remembered back, I was wait, what about her Avatar state demon that's been following her? What's that been about? That wasn't explained at all.
Yeah, exactly. And so
in that fight, and I'm just it's more interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, because you get to that fight and you're okay, she's not going to win this fight, right? There's no way, right? Because if she beats Kovira now, then the main conflict is pretty much done.
Yeah, it's only
it's only halfway through the season, so she's not going to win that fight, right? And then you're okay.
Yeah, that's she loses, and there's the rest of the fight for another half season, or she wins, and there's another big bad, fucking season 2, and it's just stupid again.
Yeah. Yeah. Vatu comes back. Imagine that Vatu's still out there and he's just the villain at the end. That would be so dumb.
Just cut off his kite string and just let him fly away.
Yeah, I definitely think the best part of this season was more the first half, maybe even a little further than the first half, right up until they got to the last 5 episodes or so. I think building up to that was some of the best parts of the season. But when you get to the climax, I don't hate the climax. I mean, it's not the worst climax of the seasons for sure.
Imagine that.
But I don't know that it's the best. I think my favorite climax of this show is probably season 3. Just the whole the whole poison thing, that was really intense when the poison was being put into her, and her trying to hold back from turning into there was some really intense moments there, and then her fight with
the interesting bending styles all merging together in this really epic battle.
Yeah, which is that's what an Avatar climax should be, I think. Not 2 giant versions of themselves fighting in the ocean. So I don't know. I've always been kind of iffy with the whole giant mecha suit fight, where they're just trying to take down this.
It comes out of nowhere, so it doesn't feel right.
So the whole super weapon thing doesn't come out of nowhere.
Right. That's
because that's been
built up, and it's neat.
Yeah. Which, by the way, again, an empire that is building a super weapon that just destroys entire civilizations. Just saying. That's very Star Wars-esque.
It's like a very basic story, though.
I mean, yeah, it is.
Oh yeah, evil government rises up, creates super weapon to take over other government. Yeah, that's pretty easy to think of. It's almost like it kind of almost happened.
Yeah, well, yeah, so yeah, I don't know. Like, the climax is just everybody trying to take down the robot, which was kind of cool. It was kind of cool to see, like, everybody kind of have, like, something to, like, a little piece of taking it down.
Yeah.
To kind of give everybody something to do.
Ways. Yeah.
Yeah, like, every character had something to do, had a nice little moment of, like, helping take it down. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, so I don't mind it. It's just like, it's weird though. It's just weird to see this giant mecha thing in Avatar. Like, in the Avatar universe. It just feels so weird.
Like all the other mechanical advancements, like the blimps and the weird, like on the assault in the first show, in like The Last Airbender, those Earth Kingdom like centipede tanks. Those are really cool. Or the Fire Nation.
Well, those were controlled with earthbending, so that makes sense, right?
Yeah. They're all. That's what I'm saying. They're all like either very in tune with the bending stuff, so it's like, oh yeah, it makes sense they would make something like this when they have these powers already. Because that giant mecha doesn't follow the same rules.
Yeah, it gets. What's kind of weird, because it's like, you notice a lot of the technology in the world advances very naturally, right? Like, by the time you get to the show, they have, like, cars, but they're, like, old-fashioned cars, you know? They would have had in, like, the 20s or whatever, 20s and 30s and stuff, which is kind of the general vibe the show's going for that time period, you know? And they had, and, you know, eventually they invent, like, they have cameras, and they have, like, video, obviously, right? Because, you know, they create the movers. So there's a lot of, like, you know, and trains and stuff, and they have a lot of, and then the blimps and everything. So they have a lot of, like, natural, and then, you know, any sort of weird technology typically is like, that seems not natural, is like something that has to do with, like, bending in some way. Like, oh, the police like slide down on these metal, like, things. Like, what? Oh, that's because they're metal benders, right? But then,
that's what I'm saying,
but then they start introducing the mecha suits and the giant one, obviously, and then, like, those hummingbird flying things, and that's where I start to get, like, a little, like, okay, really? Like, I don't know, it just feels a little
right. Well,
too much. I don't know.
My argument with all that stuff is, in order to, like, invent it, you have to think of it, right? But you get inspiration from what's around you and what you're capable of, what you are already capable of, and what you want to be capable of. So those, like, earthbender tanks make sense because, like, they're fueled by earthbending. You know, it's a logical next step.
Yeah, exactly.
But the hummingbird stuff and the mecha, like, the small mechas for, you know, it's partially for just construction work, and it can be fitted out as combat. That makes sense for non-benders. But then the giant mech is like, it's a step too far. It's a step too far.
Yeah, it definitely has this sense of, like, okay, we need something for a climax. We need something for our big epic climax. You know? And that's what they came up with, right? It doesn't...
Just another, you know, giant monster, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely not as bad as Season 2's climax, in my opinion. But that, it does lose me a little bit with that, where I'm like, okay. But I do kind of like how it's like everybody gets their little bit of helping take it down. That's kind of cool. It's like everybody's working together to stop it, and...
it's a really stupid thing that they put in there, but everything around is still really good. So it's
they did a good job.
Forgivable.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm trying to think what else. So I also found it a little strange how they kind of end the conflict of. Well, so they take the robot down, and obviously, then Korra goes to capture Kovir and stuff, and like Kovir seems to have this like change of heart at the end, right? Because Korra has this conversation with her and stuff, which like I get what they were going for with that, which was the idea of like, you know, this is Korra who has always been like, yeah, solve problems by punching things. She's able to like solve a problem like more diplomatically and more like, you know, non-violently kind of.
She has grown as a person to not just have to punch her problems.
Right. And I like that, but it was also just felt kind of weird. I'm like, you don't convince somebody who's like starting an entire empire and doing all this stuff, taking over the entire nation. You don't convince somebody to have a change of heart that easily. Like,
if somebody went through all the trouble to like conquer an entire like continent basically and only has this one city left, it's gonna take a lot more than that.
Right.
If it's anything.
And that's the thing. It's not like and like it's one thing if you had a moment like that where somebody has a change of heart and it's like a side villain, but like for the main villain, like it's not, you know, like okay, for instance, like Zuko, you know, having a change of heart and stuff makes really a lot of sense because, you know, it's all he's not the main villain. He's the one who's being manipulated by the main villain. But like in this, it's like,
and he has this whole arc that spans the entire show.
But for her, it's like if in the last episode of Avatar, Aang convinced, instead of taking away his bending, he convinced the Fire Lord to stop doing it and end the war. He just convinced him to stop and give up his power. Like, that would be, you'd be like, what the this guy would not do that. Like, I mean, it's not, maybe not quite as bad because she didn't seem as evil as him, I guess, but like still, it was still very like, she's the main villain. Come on, you can't just get her to stop
you could argue that easily. She had good intentions, but it's very stupid intentions if that's the case.
It's like good intentions, but at the same time, she's also, you can't be like, oh, she had good intentions. She's not really evil, but like, she had like, she was about to kill her fiance. She had she had all this talk about re-education camps.
The thing that I keep going back to,
there was a lot of very clear like she's evil moments in this. You know.
Yeah. The thing that I keep going back to is Korra was talking about how she was an orphan and, you know, she doesn't want anyone else to feel not in control of their own life ever. And then I think back to, oh, you mean when you put the cities that you took over and used their citizens as slaves?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Because you're doing that. You're doing the thing that you didn't want to happen. Yeah,
it just feels, it makes the villain's motivations feel kind of weak, which, because I do really like the idea of having somebody try to create an Earth empire, and I like the idea that it's like almost the opposite of the last villain, because the last villain was all about taking down the world leaders and getting rid of, you know, having everybody be free. And the next one is like the opposite. And you even have a scene where he's like, when Korra goes to see Zahir, he's like, all right, I'll help you because she needs to be taken down. Like, they're like,
and that even makes sense. Like, a lot of times when a villain has a change of heart and like joins in and helps the main character, it's always a bit iffy, but that one's just like, no, he had very clear motivations, and what is happening right now is very much against it, so it makes sense.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah, I know. So I kind of like that. I'm trying to think of other... But yeah, so we covered that kind of general idea. trying to think what other big kind of things. Yes, I kind of liked what they did with Bolin.
Oh yeah,
like you could see like 3 years have passed and like he's doing something more like kind of mature and important than you would expect him to be doing. Like
he seems to have developed his like people skills a lot more as he like discovered before.
Yeah, it's like you could definitely tell there's like real development of him in the past 3 years instead of him just continuing to be the funny guy. Like he's more than that now, you know. And he gets to work with
encouragement guy.
Yeah, and he gets to work with Varric a lot, which the two of them together is just hilarious. I think they're a great duo, you know. The scene where Varric is gonna like blows up the train is just great. I love that.
Just winking at him the entire time, trying to get him on board, and he has no idea what's happening.
It's like, Bolin, do the thing. I don't know what thing you want me to do. I'm not Julie. They have, and one of my best, and then okay. I know this is like jumping away from that a little bit, but like
I mean, who cares at the point?
We have to talk about the recap episode.
Oh yeah.
So the beginning of the episode, I'm like, you're kind of like, oh, this is just because okay. So the thing is, like, Avatar technically did a recap episode, but they did it. Yeah, except instead of just doing, oh, here's a clip show of some clips from the previous episodes and what happened. Here's a. It's like they actually made it like a play within the world, and it was like they were getting things wrong. It was hilarious, and it was just it was basically just a really, really genius way to do a recap episode. Like, I'm sure the studio probably told them, oh, we want you to do a recap episode before the finale, and they're like, okay, fine, we'll find a way to do that, and they did it. This one, so they start out, they do a more traditional recap episode in this, which is basically characters are talking about things that happened in the past, and then they show clips of things that happened in the past while they're talking about it. So for most of the episode, so they have like 3 separate sections. The first one is Mako telling the prince about his past loves and stuff, which that one kind of makes sense because it's like Mako's talking to a character who doesn't know this stuff. The one with Korra and Asami was kind of weird because it was like
you already know
telling her things like they're explaining things that they already know about each other. Yeah. But that one was kind of boring because it was just like the first one was kind of funny because it was like some funny like interjections from the characters and stuff. But the third one is the best one. And this
everything is wrong.
This scene shows you exactly why Varric is like the best character in this show. He's just hilarious, and like Bolin constantly being like, "What? No, that's not how it happened." And the best part too is they're making fun of Unalaq for being like the worst villain of the show.
Oh yeah,
because I think at the time fans all hated Unalaq as a villain. They're like, oh, he's like the worst villain in the show, and they purposely did that just to be like the villains are on a phone call and he's just like, hello. They're like, oh, I think we got rid of him. Oh no, I'm still here. And then also they all leave. Guys, where'd you go? Like, and the thing too is, for that, they did still use clips from previous episodes. They didn't reanimate any of this, but they just put new voices over it.
Mm-hmm.
So they basically did. It was like a mini, like abridged episode kind of thing. It was all. It felt like it was like some of the moments in that felt like it was like an abridged series or something like that, where they're like taking clips from a show and putting new voices in.
Yeah, I know. I watched way too much of those. I have a lot of them memorized. That's the problem.
But that was just it was just hilarious. And Varric just trying to like make it into, he's like, this is going to be the best mover you've ever seen. And trying to like reorganize the story to make it more like fun, or I don't know, just a better movie, I guess, and about enough to...
It's like none of that ever happened. How could it happen? That doesn't make any sense. Just like never get truth, never let truth get in the way of a good story. Like,
but it's yeah, no, I love Varric. Varric is just a great character.
10 out of 10.
Yeah, I think that's like, and you actually see in this show that Varric isn't just a funny character. Like, he's really intelligent and really resourceful. And
when he's first introduced, there is no sign of him being intelligent, I don't think, besides like coming up with an idea here or there. And then it's like, oh no, he's actually like building this super weapon and made a bomb.
He made the bomb, and then he sets the bomb off with somebody watching, and then he creates this whole plan. They escape, and then later on, when there's that episode where they meet up with those fugitives who escaped or whatever, the people, the other benders, and they're trying to get through, and they're in that fight, and Varric creates an EMP. He's just using what he has in the room. He's just grabbing stuff. He's like, let's see if I grab this and put this here. And it's this cool, just showing he's very resourceful and quick on his feet to figure something out. I'm like, okay.
He uses that later for a whole army of them with a huge one.
Oh yeah, a giant EMP. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you go, Varric. That's awesome.
You may not be able to levitate, but you sure can build an EMP.
Because I liked him a lot in season 2. Season 3, he wasn't in it very much. He was they kind of reduced him a lot. But in this season, they really brought him up as a really good, really prominent character again, and I really liked that. It was handled really well. Yeah.
It also just allowed a ton of comedy relief. That was gold.
That was needed. Yeah. I like Bolin, and I like him, and I like them. They're a great pairing. But one character I still don't really care for that much is Mako. I feel like he's just never been that interesting. He's just...
he doesn't develop his bending at all. He has the love triangle stuff, which isn't actually that interesting.
Yeah, and he doesn't have any interesting personality traits that make you really like it or make him really interesting. He's just kind of boring.
Yeah.
In this season, there's he's the prince's bodyguard. Yeah, that's what he'll do for this season. Sure. Okay.
He's just the villain character that we need someone to do this. Give it to Mako.
Give it to Mako, because what else are we going to do with him?
You're an investigator now. You're a police officer. And now you're a bodyguard.
Yeah. Even Asami is more interesting than him. And I don't even think she's that interesting to me. She's definitely more than him. But, they actually gave her the whole thing with, her reconnecting with her father, which was kind of a cool thing in this season. And you can actually tell in these last few seasons that they are kind of trying to pair her up with Korra more and give her and Korra more of a relationship. So that way, when you get to the end, you're kind of there's at least some building up to it. So it's not as out of nowhere.
I mean,
there's the whole thing where
the entire show, just because any time that they were alone talking, Korra would blush.
Yeah, well, I think it was mostly season 3 where that started. I think, in the first season, I don't even think they planned on that. I'm guessing because again, when the first season came out, they only planned on that one being the only season, and then season 3 and 4 I know were made very close together. So I think they were both planned out at the same time, together. So I think definitely they really started leaning into that in season 3, I think. But yeah, they were definitely trying to, and that's why at the beginning of the season, they made it that when she only wrote letters to her and not the other two, not Mako and Bolin.
It's like, I don't know why, I just felt more comfortable with her. Like, they
must have some kind of special connection. Wonder what that is. But yeah, so yeah, that creates, and that builds up to the final shot of the show, which is them going off to the spirit world together, looking into each other's eyes, ready to start a new relationship.
Vacation in the spirit world for some reason. I mean, it is pretty cool, but it's also like, what? That place.
They'll meet Iroh. They might see Iroh, and that's what I wonder though. Is like, now that the portals are open, like, does Zuko ever go to the spirit world to see Iroh? Because he knows that Iroh's there, because Korra mentioned it to him in the last season. It's like, I feel like Zuko probably is going to go to the spirit world at some point to see Iroh again.
Yeah, just pop in and see his uncle. That'd be pretty cool.
That would be a cool scene to see.
Hey, just dead uncle, how you doing?
That'd be a scene to make you cry. That'd be a nice scene to make you a dead uncle. Well, he's not really dead if he's in the spirit world. I guess he's like, his body is dead. I guess, did he ever die, or did he just kind of go to the spirit world? Like, I don't know how that
Here's my understanding of it, right? Before his body died, he abandoned it and went to the spirit world, right?
Right.
So
that's the only, at the time, that was the only way you could get to the spirit world. Yeah. Yeah. That could be. I think that's a valid explanation.
About that. It's like a neat thing to have him just wandering around there and like as a guide, but it's also like, I don't know if that's quite Iroh. Like, he is spiritually connected, but on the other hand, I don't feel like he's the kind of person who would like run away from death like that.
I don't know. I'm okay with it, I think. Yeah, it was a cool way to.
I don't know.
Yeah, I can see. Might be if. I don't know. It's kind of weird, but it's also like, I don't know. I'm okay with it.
It's neat. It is neat and interesting.
Yeah. And another interesting thing. Speaking of the spirit world, there's now 3 spirit world portals.
Oh yeah. Because
the big explosion with all the spirit vine stuff made a new spirit portal somehow, because that just happened. I guess it's because
the reason for it, and it doesn't actually affect anything because the story ends right there, so it doesn't actually have a reason to be there.
No, but whatever. Now there's 3 spirit portals: one North Pole, South Pole, and Republic City. There you go. Yeah, so I'm trying to think what else there is to talk about with this season. I'm trying to think. I don't know. How do you feel like overall with the show? Like as an ending to just the whole show, how do you feel it is? Because like
I mean, it's a good show, but there's a lot of things wrong with it. There's a lot of things that are really good with it. I can speak. And the ending's not bad, but like, obviously, you can't help but compare it to The Last Airbender, like, which is just unfair.
I mean, good point. So I think. Well, the difference between like Avatar is Avatar had much more like satisfying ending, and I think that part of the reason is because that's the ending that the show has been building up to from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
But with Legend of Korra, each season is like a completely different story, basically. Like each season is a completely different villain, a completely different conflict that they're dealing with. So it's like it feels like maybe feels like a really satisfying conclusion to that season, but does it feel like a really satisfying conclusion to the show as a whole? Like, it's like one of these where it's like, it's fine. yeah, I kind of feel the same. I mean, they tried to do like a whole thing of like having all the characters come together in one location at the end, because obviously they were all there for the wedding. But they,
I would have loved a like, it turns out all the last season is actually bringing all the previous seasons together, and there's like a whole big thing of like, oh, all this stuff caused all this, or it was all puppeteered by this big bad, and it was actually like pulled it all together in a way that allowed them to keep it separate before they knew that they only had that many seasons.
Yeah, I think it would have just been hard to do that.
I mean, of course, it's easier said than done, but
I mean, that's the thing, because each conflict from each season is so different, each villain, that it's like it would be very difficult to kind of link it all together in some way, I mean, you can link it together in some ways. So, like, I mean, the villain of the first season, you really can't connect that to any of the others. That's very separate. But, like, each it is true that each season after that, what happens with the conflict in that season leads into the conflict of the next season. So, for instance, season 2, harmonic convergence causes all the airbenders to come back. That directly leads to the conflict of the third season.
Yeah, that's neat. I like that.
And then the third season, Earth Queen gets killed. That directly leads to the conflict of the fourth season. So they did not so much with the first season, because again, they didn't even know they were making more at the time. But the second, third, and fourth season, they definitely tried to kind of put something there to kind of, have it all kind of fit together. But yeah. So at the end of it, I would probably give the show as a whole maybe like a 7 out of 10. Close to that. I think season 2 drags it down a lot, obviously.
Yeah.
And then I think each season, I don't think any of the seasons are like perfect. I mean, obviously nothing's perfect, but like none of the seasons are like ideal to me. Like, I feel like I don't know which one is my favorite. I think that's a difficult.
I think third is my favorite.
Yeah, I always lean more towards third as being my favorite, but it's always hard to think. I just think the third has probably one of the best climaxes of the show. So yeah, I feel like third is probably it's just hard to decide.
The thing with, like, obviously season 2 is trash, but has a lot of gold in there, right? It's just in a swamp of mud and shit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think the problem with the second season is the main story is what's bad. There's a lot of really cool side stories and ideas. Whereas, like, the other seasons, the main story is good, and some of the bad stuff might be some of the side stories are the bad stuff. So it's not as bad because it's side stuff. Like the love triangle. Okay, that's just a side story anyways. That's not the main plot, so it's whatever. Whereas the second season, it's the main story that's the issue.
But, like,
the main conflict.
The second season is that. First season is like, yeah, it's pretty good all around. There's a few dents here and there with side stuff. Third season is a really good, well thought out story with a lot of interesting stuff, but it's built on the foundation of the second season, so it's wobbly.
Right.
And fourth season is like, oh yeah, this is built up really well, but the climax is kind of iffy.
Yeah. That's about what I would say. That's kind of a good overview of the show. I would agree with that for the most part. But yeah, so I guess the next thing to do is to put this show in our ranking of the other shows that we've done. So remember at the new year we did a ranking of the 3 shows we had talked about before. Our list is still small enough that it's easy to just kind of do it quickly. So might as well. So just a reminder, my ranking is Avatar number 1, BoJack number 2, and Death Note number 3. where do you think Legend of Korra falls with me?
Oh.
We're going to do the thing where we guess for each other like we did before.
Right. This might just be like my own bias, but I think you would think that Death Note is better even, so probably last.
Yeah, that's where I that's where I'm putting it. I agree. Because, I mean, the thing is, like, the other shows, 3 shows are very good original shows. And this is, like, a good show, but it's also, like, a good show because it's based on an already really good show.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. And also, it's just not as... I don't know. I just feel like the other shows are very unique and specific to what they do, and it's... I don't know. It's just, you know.
Yeah, I get you.
There you go. Yeah. So your list was Avatar number 1, Death Note number 2, and BoJack number 3. Now, BoJack at the bottom. So I think you definitely think Korra is probably lower than Death Note. Is it above BoJack? See, here's where it gets complicated, because you think BoJack is a really good show, but it's just too depressing for you to want to, like, rewatch it.
Yeah, I can't really enjoy it all that much for a lot of it.
So what? So are you going to rank it based on how good you think the show is, or how good, like, how much enjoyment you would get out of, like, seeing it again? Or, like, so I'm going to go... You know, I'm just going to say you put it at the bottom, all the way at the bottom, too.
Nah, I like it better than BoJack.
There you go. Okay, yeah, I was going to say that. I was very close to saying that. There you go. So there's our little rankings. So, yeah. So anyways, we're done with Legend of Korra, which obviously means we're going to do another TV show at some point, which in 2 weeks from today, we are going to be starting our next TV show, which is going to be another anime, and it's going to be Cowboy Bebop. So,
yeah.
I've never seen it before.
For a long time.
Yeah, I've never seen it before. Cub's never seen it before. It's not a very long one, so it won't take us too long to get through it. Either 2 or 3 podcast episodes to get through it. So, pretty nice, quick one to get through. But next week we have something else, and this is actually interesting. So, let me find it here so I can find exactly what I don't have it up anymore. Oh, the movie we're doing. Okay, so
can't forget that.
Next week, if you know, we've mentioned this before, but next week is our 52nd podcast, meaning 52 weeks, which 52 weeks is a year. Well, technically a year is 52 weeks in 1 day, so it'll be 1 day before a year. So we decided for our 1 year podcast anniversary, we decided to pick a so the first episode of the podcast, which is the worst episode of the podcast, was uploaded on March 13th, 2021. So we decided to look up movies that came out on March 13th, not specifically 2021, just any year on March 13th, and pick a movie that came out on March 13th to review for our 1 year special. We were looking through a lot of the options, didn't seem that interesting. We decided on this one, which is My Cousin Vinny from 1992. March 13th, 1992 is when that movie came out. It has Joe Pesci in it, so it's got to be good, right? I don't really know anything about it other than
because you like the one actor.
Yeah, it's got good reviews too. So I've heard of it before. I just don't really know like anything about it.
Honestly, I hadn't heard of any of the ones that we saw. I was so confused. I guess March 13th isn't a very good day for popular movies to come out. So that's what we're going to be talking about, My Cousin Vinny, next week, because we'll see. None of us know anything about it, but that's the fun of this podcast. You said movies mainly come out on Fridays, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Not always, but a lot of times.
I mean, right. So most of the movies we find on March 13th will be a Friday the 13th.
Oh, that's a good point.
That
is a good point.
Made, like, a really unlucky choice, didn't we?
Well, I'll have to look at a calendar, like look back and see if March 13th, 1992 was a Friday. I'm guessing so because movies come out on Fridays a lot. I don't know if that was a thing back then. I know nowadays that's pretty much how it always is. Maybe it wasn't so as much back then. It probably is. Probably still was. But yeah, either way, we're talking about My Cousin Vinny next week. So if you want to join in the conversation, listen to us talk about it, you can watch the movie so that you're ready for the conversation. Or not. It's up to you, but we're going to spoil things. So, if you haven't seen the movie, it might not make sense. But anyways, that's about all for this episode of the podcast. Definitely look forward to next week's episode, which will be Saturday at noon Eastern Standard Time, because that's when every episode of the podcast comes out. And it's released on multiple different platforms, including our YouTube channel, which is Nim TV is my YouTube channel, which is WABAN. I don't know why I was thinking of my YouTube channel, which is WABAN.
It's getting worse every time.
There's a link in the description to that YouTube channel. It has all of the podcast episodes, and it also has some gaming videos we've been doing in Portal and Portal 2. So definitely check that out. Subscribe to that channel. We really want to build that up. And also many different audio platforms you can listen to it on, including things like Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more. So that is about all. Thank you all for watching or listening, I guess. Thank you all for listening. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.